mark the yard site, the first anniversary of when everything changed in our lives and we confront our loss. Rebecca Stoffer writes, even if we aren't grieving the death of someone over the last year, we are all grieving something that we desperately wish we could have back. The loss of freedom, of perceived control, of identity and education and childcare and health and sleep and jobs and security and community. And of course, the loss of comfortable, easy touch, that beautiful thing with the magical power to make us feel better. We've lost it for now. And it's my greatest hope that we can get it back soon. For me, I've missed hugging my parents and having them squeeze my children. Meeting my newest niece, who I have yet to meet, who will turn 1 in just a couple of weeks. Holding the hands of congregants struggling with sickness, or giving a high five to a bar or bat mitzvah student. Sharing coffee with a new temple member. Traveling to New York City to see a show or visit a museum. We share our grief and our losses by lighting this yard site candle. We mark the year that has passed, remembering how our lives have changed, but also with the hope of moving forward. We share tonight reflections from different members of our temple family who will let us know how COVID-19 has impacted their lives, the lessons they have learned, the blessings they have found, the challenges they continue to face. And as one holy community, we will write a new song, a Shir Chadash, as we continue to mark Shabbat together. Wow. It is my honor to invite up Dr. Larry Budnick to share some words with our congregation.
Thank you, Rabbi. This was a sad and tragic year, but what gave me hope was seeing ordinary people acting in extraordinary ways. Not just the healthcare workers who are on the front line, but people in our community who kept the kids learning, the businesses going, and the town moving. Bus drivers, postal carriers, engineers, parents, employees in stores, and teachers all came to the fore. People were being creative, resourceful, and flexible to quickly adapt and to help us all. At least in our area, it seemed like the people knew that we were all in this together. And as part of that, I was reminded of the importance of everyday life, not just the major events like weddings and the B'nai Mitzvah, but the ordinary activities like being with family and friends, like going shopping, like going out dining, going to a park, school activities. As our town, one of my favorite plays likes to point out that there's an extraordinariness in just the everyday ordinary activities that are not really routine, but they're special in their own ways. And that's what I took away from this past year.
Thank you, Larry, and also thank you for your hard work to keep us safe and not help us open our building, but also the greater Westfield community as well. I invite the Selvers family to share a few words.
Thank you. And so in thinking back on the year, we had an extraordinarily special event, which was our son's bar mitzvah, which had the benefit of being the very first Zoom bar mitzvah ever conducted by the temple, which also meant that it was unfortunately at the very, very beginning of the pandemic. But when trying to think back through the year, one of the lessons, one of the things that I believe that we were able to accomplish, all of us, was that there's a great ingenuity and adaptability that we all sustained in the face of adversity. Obviously, at the very beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of confusion and fear. And in terms of my wife and our own personal lives, this impacted our son and his bar mitzvah. And there was a really significant and great uncertainty as to whether or not his bar mitzvah would even go forward. But our son, as he is wont to do, was adamant about proceeding, and he had put in the work and he had earned it, and he had deserved the right to go forward. And so with the support of our friends, our family, and the temple especially, and especially you, Rabbi Prosnit and Cantor Novick, we were able to go forward. And one of the great blessings of that day was that there was a significance and an intimacy and an appreciation for Ethan's bar mitzvah, which took place right inside of our house in our dining room, that we may not have experienced otherwise, and is certainly a feeling that I know my wife and I and Ethan will have that will stay with us forever. And in particular, there was one thing that you had said, Rabbi Prosnit, during the bar mitzvah, in which you said about Ethan and his proceeding and the bar mitzvah itself was hazak, hazak, which is strength to strength, as you said. And that was as important then as it was important for the entire last year, as it is important going forward. So thank you again very much for making it a wonderful, special, and meaningful occasion.
We really appreciate it.
Rabbi Prosnit said, when everything changed, and earlier on this evening, and I thought about what that meant. I'm the principal of the Learning Community Charter School. We are a pre-K through 8 school located in Jersey City of about 654 students, and we're the most diverse school in the state. And in terms of education, all schools had to create something completely new. We learned of what we could do. We staged virtual concerts, graduations. We were able to Zoom with authors and activists around the world. This past week, we staged a musical where not a single one of our students ever met to practice. They recorded themselves. We also learned what we can't do. Students left alone at home with only a computer to watch them, or children that would Zoom in from a vast country house upstate to a child whose only place to work was underneath a bed or in a closet. But we learned also the centrality of school in the lives of those involved in education or those that have children in their homes. When you take it away, it's almost as if the seasons go or the time of year vanishes and we lose our bearings. So we've learned so much. And now we begin to prepare to change ourselves one more time as we prepare in our school to return in April. And this Monday, I have the great honor of bringing 55 of our faculty members to be for their first vaccination. And it provides us a wonderful time to think about the future. But the greatest lesson that we have all learned throughout this is that the best of schools, and for those of you that are thinking about this, always look for this. The very best are ones where their charge is actually not education, but to be a home full of love for all. Thank you.
You may be seated. And now it is my pleasure to invite our next guest speaker this evening, Amanda White.
So when the pandemic first started, I was pretty bored. I was spending a lot of time on social media, and I kept coming across all these bakers that were baking fabulous cakes and cookies. And I decided that since I love baking, I was going to start to bake all these different things. So whenever I asked my family what I should make, my dad always said chocolate chip cookies. So I started making tons of chocolate chip cookies, trying to find the best recipe out there, and ultimately coming up with my own recipe. And then I was making so many cookies that my mom said I need to donate some. So I started donating them to local nurses and local homeless shelter. And the feedback was that everyone kept asking when my cookies were coming back. So I continued to bake over the summer, and the fall came around and school started, and I didn't really have too much time. So I put the cookie baking on the back burner, and then my cheerleading got canceled for 2 weeks. And I knew I was going to be super bored. So I decided to just start baking some cookies, see if anyone would want to buy them. And I posted on Facebook. I made a Facebook group called Fat Dog Cookie, and the business took off. We now we do 4 flavors monthly, and I've baked over 850 dozen cookies since mid-September.
Thank you, Amanda, for that bright light during our pandemic.
In this week's double portion by Achel Pikudei, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, is finally complete. After hard work, the collection of donations, and the following of strict blueprints, Moses inspects the sacred structure and deems it fit for God. We read in our Torah portion, and Moses saw all the work, and behold, they had done it just as God had commanded. So Moses blessed them. After completing such a challenging and arduous build, overcoming obstacles, and working together, Moses blesses the Israelites. The Torah does not share the blessing. We as readers need to fill in the blanks. Luckily, we are not the first to ask the question, what was Moses' blessing? A midrash offers a suggestion. He said to them, may it be the will of God that the Shekhinah may rest upon the work of your hands, and may the presence of God, our God, be upon us. But was Moses' blessing really necessary? A couple of chapters earlier in our Torah, God had told the Israelites that God would dwell among them. God had already promised them this blessing. Did Moses really have to offer his? A 17th century Hungarian rabbi, the Ketav Sofer, explains that Moses was not offering a blessing that God's presence would fill the Mishkan, but instead, he was blessing the work of their hands. The children of Israel had thrown themselves into this project, were dedicated in supporting each other, each bringing their own donations, their own talents, their own efforts in accomplishing a community goal. Moses was blessing their dedication and following through with God's instructions. This pandemic is far from over. We recognize that there will still be loss, still sickness, still financial hardship, and still changes in the way we live our lives. Yet we do see hope. We see a bit of light, symbolizing perhaps the end to the pandemic. And just as Moses blessed the Israelites on the completion of the Mishkan, it is our duty to bless those who have helped us throughout this past year. We offer thanks and blessing to the hands of the doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers who dedicated their lives, their skills, and their hearts to take care of the sick. To the hands of the medical scientists and researchers, health officials, manufacturers, who speedily found vaccines, treatments, and deterrents to help stop the spread of COVID-19. The hands of the essential workers, who made sure our deliveries and groceries were there for us. The hands of the teachers, administrators, parents, and learners who navigated a different year of schooling. to the hands of the creators of Zoom and other technology who made us feel a little bit less isolated, and to the hands of this sacred community who have supported those in our midst who were bereaved, who were sick, who were alone, to those who donated funds, who found vaccine appointments for our members, who delivered food, challah, and made calls, to all who lifted their voices in song on Shabbat, on the high holy days, and throughout our festivals. You helped us raise our holiness. The work of our hands and our hearts truly need to be blessed, just as Moses did on the completion of the Mishkan. So we pray, may it be your will that the Shekhinah may rest upon the work of our hands, and may the presence of God, our God, be upon us. Amen. We mark the specialness, the sweetness of this Shabbat with the words of Kiddush. If you had something sweet in your life that happened this past week, I invite you to share it in the chat box to let us know so we can celebrate in your sweetness. I saw earlier in the chat box that this is the anniversary of Andy Barron's bar mitzvah, I think just 13 years ago maybe, and his son 10 years ago. And so we celebrate that. But if you have any other celebrations that you want to share, please do so in the chat box, and I invite everyone to rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafel.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, b'shabbat kodsho b'yom ha'uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron l'ma'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila l'mikrei kodesh zecher l'tzion mitzrayim, kivanu v'charka v'yotanu kidashta mikomim v'shabbat kodshecha b'yahava u'b'ratzon hinachaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Some sweetness. Someone got their second vaccine today. The Wassers are delighted to share that their daughter Karen became engaged to Jed Steiner. Mazel tov to the Wasser family. And Kara Barnett shares that her mom turned 70 this week. Happy birthday to your mom and Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated, Mazel tov. And I now, celebrating your mom's birthday, Kara, I also invite Dr. Kara Barnett to share some words as well.
Unmute. Hi, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Kara Barnett. I'm a physician and director of anesthesia services at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, Monmouth Regional Site. So things have definitely changed since a year ago. All our patients are COVID tested within 72 hours of surgery, unless they've had a documented COVID infection. So it can get very tricky when someone tests positive and they're supposed to be coming in for surgery. We have hospital guidelines that have, changed over time as the science has changed. So we've had to keep up with that. On some days, I am taking care of 25 patients. So that's 25 potential exposure, because there are such thing as false negatives. And as an anesthesiologist, a lot of times you are in patients' spaces because you're making sure that they're breathing. So I've been wearing 2 masks, an N95 and a surgical mask that has a face shield connected to it, which I've gotten used to. Last year, I was just wearing a surgical mask while in only the operating room. So now I'm wearing 2 masks and a face shield pretty much almost all day, except when I'm in my office. So it's a new way of life for sure. A year ago was definitely tough. A lot of fears at that time, but we just keep going. I drive through 2 feet of snow in a blizzard. I'm going to take care of my patients. So I'm very dedicated, and all my colleagues are, and I'm very proud that we've still been able to take care of them through this. Thank you.
Return to the words by Jody Gunsberg.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Kara, Amanda, everybody who spoke tonight, your stories are amazing, and you're a hard act to follow. I'm just a regular citizen of Westfield and member of the temple before I became known as that lady whose whole family got COVID and father who died. This has been a very difficult year in my life, as I'm sure many of you can relate and feel the same way. I think all of us have experienced some profound loss of life of what was before the pandemic. For my family and me, our deepest loss was my father's death from COVID-19. But we also lost many other connections, opportunities, and memories. However, I feel like focusing on our losses is so devastating that I try to reflect on some silver linings that we've had from the pandemic that I'd like to share with you. So first, these might seem simple, but I spend more quality time with my husband, Corey, and my 2 sons, Lucas, who's 15 years old, and Simon, who's 12. Our time at home enabled us to get a new puppy, Wrigley, into our family, and she has brought us endless hours of entertainment and great laughs. We were able to spend a lot of time in our home in Vermont as we were all working and learning remotely. It was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to get to go skiing after school. I had the opportunity to advise our clients on how to navigate the most tumultuous markets of all time, enabling them to continue to pay pension benefits and make philanthropic donations, and for endowments to continue to pay out to control tuition costs. And through the amazing technology of Zoom, I was able to advise the Democratic Republic of Congo on developing natural resources in a sustainable way so that they could bring electricity to their population of over 101 million people who still cook on fire and coal. But how can there be a silver lining from losing your father? Well, first, as our family fell ill like dominoes, we had over 10 cases of COVID. Fear, blame, anger, and regret were some of our first emotional responses. Given the seriousness of the crisis we were facing, my family, we immediately needed to embrace forgiveness and come together to get through this difficult time, which is still difficult. Next, I've grown closer to my brother as we realize the importance of our sibling bond. And I am seeing once again unprecedented support from my husband, who, by the way, is a rock star stay-at-home husband. Religious rituals I've taken for granted now have a more important meaning to me. First, my uncle passed in October, and we had a small graveside funeral and an outdoor shiva at my house in my backyard for 2 days. We were grateful for the chance to share memories with friends and family, although it was far from traditional. While that was altered, the rules changed even more by the time my father passed in December. There was a very short outdoor burial in the freezing cold with no shiva. The missing rituals feels empty and like a lack of closure. I'm extremely grateful and honored. I was actually holding my father's hand at the moment he passed. Only one visitor per day was allowed in the hospital for 30 minutes, and he passed about 5 minutes after I arrived. We were very close, like 2 peas in a pod, and I feel like he waited for me. Also, my son Simon will become a bar mitzvah this year in June. It will be our first family milestone celebration without my dad. And also the loss of gathering in person with all of our families and friends is painful. But the day will be about celebrating Simon as he assumes the responsibility for his actions as a full-fledged member of the Jewish community. To me, stripped down versions of the modern day bar mitzvah has elevated the meaning of the religious ceremony itself. And I believe that his generation will take the most valuable lessons into their adulthoods. Lastly, I want to share with you a lesson I learned that hopefully you can embrace and perhaps apply in your own lives. I learned how being vulnerable and sharing mistakes can save others. While I'm meant to only share our stories with my quote-unquote closest friends and family on Facebook, I never intended our story to spread and resonate so deeply in our community and beyond. The greatest gift of my father's passing is knowing that other lives were saved as countless people, friends, family, and strangers from all over the world wrote to tell me they changed their plans because of our tragedy. So I encourage you to reflect on this Shabbat, on the anniversary of the pandemic, on one silver lining that you can find from the pandemic to improve your life and of others in the future. So thanks again for joining us, and Shabbat Shalom, and thanks for staying to listen to my story.
Thank you, Jody. May your father's memory always be for a blessing.